Maya Bennett had learned to read a room before she ever learned to read a menu, and the private dining room at Kesler House was screaming at her from the moment she stepped through its lacquered doors carrying a tray of chilled sake cups. 24 years old, 5 years into fine dining, and she had never once seen a client insist on inspecting the seal of a bottle before it touched the table. But the man at the head of the table did exactly that, turning a small glass decanter between two fingers as though it might confess something to him. His name, she would learn within the hour, was Ryo Tanaka, and he wore his black suit the way other men wore silence, as something total and impossible to argue with. His hair was cut close at the sides, longer on top, and a thin white scar traced the edge of his left eyebrow, the kind of scar that told you a story had happened and would never be told to you. His eyes were dark, nearly black, and they moved across the room in slow, deliberate sweeps, cataloging exits, cataloging faces, cataloging her. The restaurant had reserved the entire east wing for the afternoon at his request, glass walls overlooking the garden courtyard, low winter light falling gold across white tablecloths. 6 men sat at the table. 3 belonged to Tanaka. 3 belonged to the Osaka contingent, men Maya did not know but whose watches alone could have paid off her student loans twice over. Between them sat a leather folio, and inside that folio sat the reason for the entire afternoon, a business contract that would merge 2 territories, 2 supply chains, 2 decades of careful, bloody neutrality into one signature. Maya's job was simple. Pour the wine. Refill the water. Disappear into the wallpaper the way good service required. She had done it 1,000 times in 1,000 rooms exactly like this one, rooms full of men who spoke in numbers too large to be real and never looked at her twice. She set the sake cups down one by one, moving counterclockwise the way she had been trained, and it was on her third pour, standing just behind Tanaka's left shoulder, that she saw it. The paper stock. She had spent 2 years of her early 20s working reception at a corporate law office before culinary school stole her, and there were things about legal paper that never left a person once they had spent enough hours photocopying it. The contract in the folio was printed on stock with a subtle blue undertone, the kind used almost exclusively by discount printing houses that catered to forgers and desperate small businesses cutting corners. Real corporate contracts of this size, contracts worth what this one was clearly worth, were printed on cotton blend paper with a visible watermark when held to light. This paper had no watermark. She had noticed it in the half-second the folio lay open on the table, the way she might notice a crack in a window she was about to lean against. She should have said nothing. She knew that even as her feet slowed near the head of the table. This was not her business. This was not her fight. She was a waitress, and men like these did not want waitresses with opinions about legal paper. But Ryo Tanaka's pen was already uncapped. "Excuse me," she said, and her voice came out steadier than she expected, low enough that only he would hear it. "This is fake." She said it in Japanese. The room did not stop, not exactly, but something in it tightened, the way air tightens before a storm decides which direction to break. Tanaka's pen paused a half-inch above the signature line. He did not turn his head immediately. He simply asked, in the same language, without looking at her, "What did you say?" "The paper," Maya said, keeping her voice low, professional, the same tone she would use to recommend a wine pairing. "It's not the stock a firm like Kesho Trading would use for a contract this size. There's no watermark. I used to work in a law office. I've seen enough contracts printed on paper like this to know what it usually means." Now he turned. His eyes found hers and held them, and for one endless second Maya understood exactly what people meant when they said a man's stare had weight. It was not attraction, not yet, not anything she could name safely in that moment. It was the sensation of being measured by someone who measured everything and rarely found what he needed. "You speak Japanese," he said. "Not a question. I studied it. For work, originally." She did not elaborate. There was no time to elaborate, because the man seated across from Tanaka, a broad-shouldered man named Hiroshi Sato, who represented the Osaka side of the table, had gone very still, and stillness from a man like that was its own kind of warning. "This is absurd," Sato said, switching to English, his accent smoothing the edges of the word. "You are taking legal advice from a waitress." I am taking observations from someone paying closer attention to my table than my own lawyer apparently was, Tanaka said, and he closed the folio without signing it. That was the moment everything changed. Sato's men shifted in their seats, small movements, hands drifting toward jackets in a particular way that told Maya these were not businessmen at all, not in the way the restaurant's reservation system had listed them. Tanaka's own men mirrored the movement half a second later, and the temperature of the room dropped in the way rooms do when several people simultaneously calculate how fast they could reach a weapon. "Sit down," Tanaka said, and though his voice never rose, every man at the table obeyed it instantly, including, Maya noticed with a strange jolt, herself. He looked at her again. "What is your name?" "Maya." "Maya," he repeated, and something about the way he said it was different from the way anyone had ever said her name before, deliberate, as though he were setting it down somewhere permanent. "You will stay. Everyone else in this room who is not mine or hired by Kesler House will leave. Now." Sato began to protest, and Tanaka cut him off with 2 words in Japanese that Maya did not fully catch, but that emptied the color from Sato's face. Within 90 seconds, the Osaka men were gone, herded out by Tanaka's people with a courtesy so precise it felt like violence with better manners. Maya stood alone with Ryo Tanaka and 3 of his men, holding an empty serving tray, wondering exactly how badly she had just altered the trajectory of her own life. "Sit," Tanaka said, gesturing to the chair across from him, the one Sato had vacated. "I have other tables." "You had other tables." He said it without cruelty, simply as fact. "As of now, you work for me for the rest of the afternoon. Kesler House will be compensated."
"Seat."
She sat. Up close, the cologne he wore was something dark and warm, cedar layered under a thread of smoke, the kind of scent that did not announce itself so much as settle into a room and refuse to leave. His hands, folded now on the table in front of him, were scarred across 2 knuckles, and his nails were clean and precise in a way that made the scars more unsettling, not less. "Tell me what you saw," he said. "Everything. Do not summarize for my comfort." So she told him. The paper stock. The missing watermark. The slightly uneven kerning in the signature block, a detail she had almost missed but that now, saying it aloud, felt obvious. A forged contract commissioned in a hurry, printed somewhere without the resources of a real corporate house, designed to look legitimate to anyone who was not paying close attention. "If I had signed that," Tanaka said quietly, "the merger would have gone forward on paper that does not legally bind Kesho Trading to anything they claim it binds them to. I would have handed Sato access to 3 of my supply routes for nothing. $150 million in projected annual revenue, gone, and I would not have known until the damage was already done." "I didn't know the number," Maya said. "I just knew the paper was wrong." "That is usually how the important things reveal themselves," Tanaka said. "Small, easy to miss, easy to dismiss." One of his men, a broad man named Daichi standing near the door, cleared his throat.
"Sir."
If she is right, Sato knew. He would not have brought fraudulent paper without knowing. "I know," Tanaka said, and something in his voice went colder, quieter, more final. "Which means Sato intended to rob me in my own city, at my own table, and was arrogant enough to believe I would not check the paper myself." Maya felt the shift in the room before she understood it.
This was no longer about a contract.
This was about to become about consequences, and she was sitting directly across from the man who would decide what those consequences looked like. "I should go," she said, standing. "No," Tanaka said, and though the word was soft, it was not a request. "You just made yourself relevant to a conflict you do not understand yet. Sato will not simply walk away from an embarrassment like this one. He will want to know how his forgery was caught. He will find out it was a waitress." He looked at her, and for the first time something almost like regret crossed his face, gone as quickly as it appeared. "Which makes you a liability to him, and therefore a target." "That's not my problem," Maya said, though her voice shook slightly on the last word, because some part of her already understood that it had just become exactly her problem. "It is now," Tanaka said. "I am sorry for that. I am not sorry enough to pretend otherwise." He stood, buttoning his jacket with 2 fingers, an unconscious motion, and Maya realized she was staring at his hands again, at the precision in even the smallest gesture. "Come with me," he said. "Not because I am asking prettily. Because Sato's men are still in this building, and I would rather you were somewhere I can see you for the next several hours." Maya thought of her apartment, her roommate, her ordinary Tuesday that had somehow detonated into this. She thought about walking out the front door of Kesler House and driving home and pretending none of this had happened. She followed him instead. The car that waited for them outside was a black sedan with tinted windows, and Daichi drove while a second man, younger, quieter, sat in the front passenger seat with one hand resting near his jacket the entire ride. Tanaka sat beside Maya in the back, close enough that she could feel the heat coming off him, not touching her, but present in a way that made the air between them feel charged and small. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere safer than a public restaurant with your name now attached to an insult against Hiroshi Sato's pride." He glanced at her. "You are not in danger for me."
I want to be clear about that.
"Whatever else happens today, you are not in danger from me." That's supposed to be comforting.
It is supposed to be true, he said.
Comfort was not the goal. Despite herself, something in his flat honesty landed better than a lie would have. They arrived at a private building in a part of the city Maya did not recognize, glass and steel rising above a courtyard with a single carved stone fountain, water running silent and constant over black rock. Inside, the penthouse floor was minimal, cold in its beauty, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a skyline turning orange with early evening. "Sit," Tanaka said again, gesturing to a low leather chair near the window, and this time Maya noticed he said it less like a command and more like an offering, an attempt at courtesy from a man who clearly was not practiced in extending it. Daichi and the younger man, whose name she learned was Ren, took positions near the door and the hallway respectively, and Tanaka moved to a bar cart along the far wall, pouring 2 glasses of something amber and precise. "I don't drink on the job," Maya said. "You are no longer on the job." He handed her the glass anyway. "You are a guest in a war you did not ask to join. Drink or do not. I would rather you had something in your hand than nothing."
She took a sip.
It burned pleasantly, tasted like smoke and something sweeter underneath, and she set the glass down on the table beside her, watching him settle into the chair across from her with the same economy of motion he brought to everything. "Tell me about yourself," he said. "Why?" "Because you saved me a great deal of money and possibly my standing with 3 territories today, and I know almost nothing about you beyond your name and your talent for reading paper stock." A faint, almost invisible curve touched the corner of his mouth. "Humor me." She told him the basics, guarded, careful. Culinary school after 2 years of a law office job that made her hate fluorescent lighting forever. A mother in Georgia who called every Sunday. A studio apartment, 3 bus transfers from Kesler House. Nothing dramatic, nothing that explained why a man like Ryo Tanaka was looking at her like she was a puzzle he had not expected to enjoy solving. "And you," she said, surprising herself. "What is Kesho trading, actually? Beyond the version people put on business cards." Something shuddered briefly behind his eyes. An import and logistics network. Legitimate on paper for the parts of it that need to be. Less legitimate underneath, for the parts that need to be that instead. "That's not an answer." "It is the only answer I give people I have known for 3 hours," he said, but there was no anger in it, only fact. "Ask me again in a week. The answer may be different." The certainty in that statement, the assumption of a week, of continued contact, sat strangely warm in Maya's chest, and she did not examine why. Night fell fully over the skyline, and Daichi brought food, simple and elegant, and for a while the conversation moved into safer waters. Restaurants Tanaka had eaten in across 3 continents, a story about a chef in Kyoto who had once refused to serve him until he removed his shoes, told with a dryness that made Maya laugh out loud before she caught herself. "You do not laugh easily," Tanaka observed. "Neither do you." "No," he agreed. "I do not." It was nearly 10 when Rin appeared in the doorway, face carefully neutral in the way Maya was beginning to recognize meant something was wrong. He spoke to Tanaka in quiet, rapid Japanese, and Maya caught only fragments, enough to understand the word for restaurant, the word for camera, the word for found. Tanaka's jaw tightened. He turned to Maya. Sato's people reviewed the restaurant's security footage. They have your face. Maya felt the floor tilt slightly beneath her, the abstract danger of the afternoon suddenly solid and specific. What does that mean? It means Sato knows the waitress who exposed his forgery is under my protection now, which insults him twice over, and it means he may attempt to reach you to send a message to me. Tanaka's voice stayed level, but his hands had gone still on the arms of his chair in a way that felt more dangerous than any raised voice could have. You will not be going home tonight. You can't just decide that. I am not deciding it for you. I am telling you what is true. If you walk out of this building tonight, there is a reasonable chance Sato's men are watching your apartment already. He met her eyes, and for the first time she saw something that looked almost like an apology living behind the calculation. I would rather you were furious with me in a safe room than agreeable in a dangerous one. She wanted to argue. She opened her mouth to argue. But some steadier, more clinical part of her, the part that had noticed the paper stock in the first place, understood he was not wrong, and that understanding made the fear in her chest sharpen into something closer to focus.
Fine, she said.
But I'm not hiding in a corner while you decide my life for me. If I'm stuck in the middle of this, I want to know what's actually happening. Something shifted in his expression, brief and genuine, something close to respect. Most people ask me to make the danger disappear. You are asking to understand it instead. Making it disappear isn't an option. Understanding it is. He studied her for a long moment, and the silence between them was not empty. It carried weight, carried the accumulated attention of a man who did not offer his focus lightly. Sato has wanted a piece of my territory for 2 years, Tanaka said finally. The merger contract was his attempt to take it through paper instead of violence, a slower theft dressed as partnership. Now that the theft has failed publicly, he will either retreat, which is unlikely given his temperament, or he will escalate, which is far more likely, to save face among the men who answer to him. He paused. Men like Sato do not survive humiliation quietly. They require someone to blame and someone to punish. Me. You exposed him. Yes. The bluntness of it should have frightened her more than it did. Instead it steadied something in her, the plainness of a threat named clearly instead of hidden behind soft words. Over the following 2 days, Maya did not leave the penthouse, and the strange rhythm of that confinement built something between them that neither of them named aloud. She learned that Tanaka rose before dawn and ran the building's private gym floor alone for exactly 40 minutes. She learned he took his coffee black and drank exactly 1 cup, never 2. She learned that when he was thinking through a problem, he touched the scar above his eyebrow without seeming to notice he was doing it, and once, when she asked about it, his hand stilled entirely, and he said only, "Someone I trusted taught me a lesson I did not want to learn," and offered nothing further. She, in turn, told him things she rarely told anyone. About the law office job that had nearly convinced her she was meant for a smaller, quieter life than the one she wanted. About her father, gone since she was 19, a car accident on a rainy interstate that had taught her early that safety was an illusion people paid extra to believe in. Tanaka listened the way he did everything, completely, without the distracted half-attention most people offered, and something about being fully seen by a man that dangerous felt more intimate than she was prepared to admit. On the 3rd night, Rin burst into the penthouse's main room with news that changed the shape of everything. Sato's people had been spotted near Kesler House, asking questions about a waitress named Maya, offering money to any staff willing to talk. Worse, a name had surfaced from inside Tanaka's own organization, a soldier named Isamu who had reportedly been in contact with Sato's people over the past week, feeding information neither man should have had. A traitor, Tanaka said, and his voice had gone very quiet. The particular quiet Maya was learning to fear more than shouting. Someone close enough to know Sato's forged contract existed before it reached my table. Someone close enough to sell that knowledge.
Who? Maya asked.
Isamu has served me for 6 years. Tanaka's hand found the scar above his eyebrow again, pressed there. It was among the first men I trusted after I took control of this territory. Maya watched something old and painful move across his face, the specific grief of betrayal by someone who should have been safe. "You've been betrayed before," she said quietly. "By someone like him." His eyes flicked to hers, sharp with surprise that she had seen it so clearly. "A woman I loved, years ago. Reiko. She worked inside my organization's finance office. She discovered a rival was planning to move against me and told no one, believing the rival's promises of protection in exchange for her silence." His voice stayed level, but something underneath it had gone raw. The rival killed her anyway once he no longer needed her. I found out what she had done, and what had been done to her in the same hour. I have not trusted easily since. "That's why you didn't sign the contract the second I said something," Maya said, understanding arriving slow and complete. "You've learned to listen when someone tells you something is wrong, even when it's inconvenient." "I have learned that ignoring inconvenient truths costs more than the truths themselves," he said. "You reminded me of that today in a restaurant, without knowing you were doing it." The air between them had gone thick, charged, the kind of silence that asked a question neither of them was ready to answer aloud. Maya looked away first, toward the window, toward the city lights strung out like something breakable. "What happens with Isamu?" she asked, steering them back towards solid ground. "He is found. He is questioned. If he sold information that endangers you, he answers for it." Tanaka's voice had gone flat again, controlled, and Maya understood. She was hearing the version of him that had built and held territory in a city that did not forgive weakness. It happened faster than Maya expected. By the following afternoon, Daichi and Run had located Isamu at a rented apartment 2 districts away, and Tanaka left with 4 men to confront him, instructing Maya to remain in the penthouse with a 5th guard posted at the door. She did not remain. She told herself later it was instinct, the same instinct that had noticed the paper stock, the same refusal to sit quietly while consequences unfolded around her without her input. She waited until the guard, a young man clearly unused to arguing with anyone who was not Tanaka himself, stepped away to take a phone call, and she slipped out through the service stairwell, catching a car to the address Run had mentioned in passing 2 days earlier, without realizing she had memorized it. The apartment building was old, narrow, the kind of place where danger did not announce itself with grandeur but hid instead in dim hallways and doors that did not quite close all the way. Maya reached the 3rd floor just as raised voices spilled from an apartment at the end of the hall, and through the gap in the doorway she saw Tanaka standing across from a lean, nervous man she assumed was Isamu, and behind Isamu, half hidden in the apartment's kitchen doorway, a second man she did not recognize, one whose hand was already moving toward a weapon holstered at his side, aimed at Tanaka's unguarded back. Maya did not think. She screamed his name, the warning tearing out of her before her mind caught up to her mouth, and Tanaka moved on instinct honed by years of exactly this kind of moment, pivoting low and fast, closing the distance to the second man before the weapon fully cleared its holster. The confrontation that followed was brutal and short, controlled violence delivered with the economy Maya had already come to associate with him, and within seconds the second man was disarmed and pinned, Isamu frozen against the wall with his hands raised, and Tanaka breathing hard, alive, turning to find Maya standing in the doorway with her heart slamming against her ribs. "You should not be here," he said, but his voice cracked slightly on the words, the first crack Maya had heard in it since the restaurant.
"He was going to shoot you," she said.
"I wasn't going to stand outside and let that happen because you told me to stay put." For a long moment neither of them moved, the aftermath of violence still humming in the room around them, and then Tanaka crossed the space between them in 3 strides and pulled her into him, his arms closing around her with a force that spoke of fear he had not let himself feel until this exact second. He did not say anything. He simply held her, his face pressed briefly into her hair, and Maya felt something in her own chest crack open in response, a wall she had not realized she was still holding up. "You could have died," he said finally, quietly, against her ear. "So could you," she answered. "I wasn't going to let that happen if I could stop it." He pulled back enough to look at her, and his expression had shed every careful, calculated layer she had watched him wear for 3 days. "No one has done that for me since Reiko," he said. No one has run toward danger to protect me instead of running from it. I'm not her, Maya said, steady, deliberate. No, he said, and something in his voice broke open into a kind of wonder he clearly was not used to feeling. You're not. That is the entire point. Behind them, Daichi cleared his throat, gesturing at Isamu, who remained frozen against the wall, and the moment folded itself carefully back into business. Isamu confessed within minutes, admitting he had sold information about a shipment schedule to Sato months earlier out of simple financial desperation, never intending for it to escalate into a forged contract or a threat against an outsider like Maya. Tanaka's judgment was swift and quiet, delivered in a tone that offered no room for negotiation, and Isamu was removed from the room by two of Tanaka's men, his fate a matter Maya understood she would not be told the details of, and did not ask to know. The second man, the one who had drawn the weapon, was Sato's, sent to ensure Isamu's silence about the botched contract permanently. His presence confirmed what Tanaka had suspected. Sato was not retreating. He was cleaning up loose ends, and Maya, the person who had exposed the fraud publicly, remained the loosest end of all. That night, back in the penthouse, the air between them had changed entirely. Maya sat curled in the same leather chair by the window, wrapped in a blanket Run had produced without being asked, and Tanaka stood near the glass, looking out at the city, his reflection ghosted faintly over the skyline. I have spent 6 years building something that could not be taken from me the way everything else was taken, he said, not turning around.
Territory.
Loyalty.
Control.
I told myself none of it required trust, because trust was the mechanism that had gotten Reiko killed. I have been very disciplined about not trusting anyone since. He turned then, and his eyes found hers across the room. I do not know what to do with the fact that I trust you already, after 3 days, more than I have trusted anyone in 6 years. You don't have to know what to do with it tonight, Maya said. I told myself staying cautious was survival, he said, crossing the room slowly, stopping close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating off him. I am beginning to understand I was lying to myself about what survival actually requires. Maya rose from the chair, and the space between them closed to almost nothing, the charged silence from 3 nights of proximity finally arriving at the place it had been building toward since the moment she said the word fake in a language he had not expected her to speak. He reached out and touched her face, careful, deliberate, the same precision he brought to everything, and she did not pull away. Sato is still out there, she said quietly. This isn't over. No, he agreed. It is not. But I am no longer willing to pretend I do not know what I want simply because the timing is inconvenient. His thumb traced the line of her jaw. I want you to be safe. I also want you to stay. Those 2 things might not be compatible right now. Then we will make them compatible, he said, and there was something fierce underneath the calm of it, a promise rather than a hope. She was the one who closed the last distance between them, rising onto her toes, and the kiss that followed was slow and certain, nothing like the explosive collision she might have expected from a man who moved through violence like language. It was careful instead, deliberate, both of them choosing it fully aware of everything it would cost and everything it would demand going forward. The following morning, word arrived that Sato had gathered his remaining loyal men and was moving on one of Tanaka's smaller distribution warehouses on the edge of the city, a direct act of war meant to punish the public humiliation of the failed contract. Tanaka's men mobilized within the hour, and Maya, rather than being left behind in the penthouse a second time, insisted on being brought along, arguing correctly that her knowledge of financial paperwork could help identify anything else Sato's people might have falsified in the warehouse's shipping records, evidence that could be used against him publicly and permanently. The warehouse stood at the edge of the industrial district, corrugated steel and concrete under a gray afternoon sky, and the confrontation that unfolded there was tense and fast, gunfire echoing off metal walls as Tanaka's men moved to secure the perimeter. Maya stayed low behind a row of shipping crates as instructed, but when one of Sato's men rounded the corner behind Daichi, weapon raised, she did not hesitate. She grabbed a length of steel pipe from the ground beside her and swung it hard into the man's arm, knocking his aim wide long enough for Daichi to turn and finish the fight himself. You are supposed to stay down, Daichi said afterward, breathless, half amused despite the chaos still unfolding around them. I don't do well with staying down, Maya said, and somewhere across the warehouse floor she caught Tanaka watching her, something fierce and unmistakable in his expression even through the noise and danger of the moment. Sato himself was found in the warehouse's small office, attempting to destroy a set of ledgers that, once recovered, would prove not only the forged contract but months of falsified shipping manifests designed to slowly bleed territory from 3 separate organizations across the city. Tanaka stood over him at the end of it, calm again, controlled again, and the confrontation that followed was not loud. It was quiet and final, and Maya understood without needing every detail explained to her that Sato's presence in the city's underworld had ended in that office, one way or another. It's over, Tanaka said later, standing beside her outside the warehouse as evening settled cool and gray around them, sirens absent, the aftermath handled quietly by people whose job it was to make such things disappear. Sato will not trouble either of us again. What happens now? Maya asked. He turned to face her fully, and for a moment the calculating, precise man she had first seen inspecting a sake bottle seemed to fall away entirely, replaced by someone simpler, more exposed. Now I ask you to stay, not because you are in danger and require protection, but because I want you here regardless. I am not accustomed to wanting anything for reasons that are not strategic. His hand found hers, deliberate, certain. This is new. I find I do not mind it. I have a life, Maya said, though there was no real resistance in it, only honesty. An apartment. A job I actually like most days. I'm not going to become someone who disappears into your world and stops being herself. I am not asking you to disappear, he said. I am asking you to choose this, fully aware of what it costs, the way you chose to run toward a man with a gun instead of away from him. I am asking you to choose it the way you chose to speak up in a restaurant where staying silent would have been so much easier. Maya looked at him for a long moment, weighing everything she now understood about the world he lived in, the danger that would likely never fully leave it, the man standing in front of her who had shown her more of himself in 5 days than most people showed in years. I'm not doing this because I need saving, she said. I want that understood. You have never needed saving, he said. You saved my fortune, my territory, and very nearly my life, in that order, within the same week. I am not offering you rescue. I am offering you a choice. Then yes, she said. I'm choosing this. Eyes open. He said her name then, quiet, certain, the way he had said it from the very first moment in the restaurant, and this time she understood completely what made it different from the way anyone else said it. It was not possession. It was recognition, the sound of a man naming something he intended to keep, and something she intended to be kept by, fully on her own terms. The city lights came up slowly around them as the evening deepened, and neither of them moved to go anywhere just yet, standing instead in the quiet aftermath of everything that had nearly been lost and everything that had, against every reasonable expectation, been found. If this story pulled you in, make sure you like this video and subscribe for more dangerous, slow-burn romance stories just like Maya and Rio's. Drop a comment and tell me which moment hit you hardest, and let me know which city or which boss you want to see next. There are more stories like this one waiting for you, so stay close.